You thought you found the most profound, deeply consuming physical connection of your entire life. In those early days, their touch felt like absolute magic. They mirrored your deepest desires, making you feel entirely seen, incredibly safe, and totally worshipped. But that intense, fiery passion was actually a heavily manufactured trap. We need to talk about the terrifying reality of physical intimacy with a narcissist. It leaves you feeling completely empty, broken, and shivering in the dark, yet desperately craving their touch again. Why does something so deeply painful become so intensely addictive? Today, we are exposing the dark, psychological chemistry of this bond. You probably spent endless nights staring at the ceiling, feeling a sickening knot of shame in your stomach. You gave them your absolute vulnerability, expecting true safety. Instead, you were met with a mechanical deadness that left you feeling entirely used. And yet, your body still intensely ached for their completely fake, toxic warmth. Stop carrying that heavy burden of immense guilt today. You are not weak, and you are certainly not crazy. Your deep addiction to their physical touch was never a flaw in your character. It was a highly calculated biological hijacking of your nervous system. They deliberately turned your own beautiful, natural chemistry entirely against you. The first chilling truth is that they weaponized the honeymoon phase. They love-bombed your body just like they love-bombed your mind. They studied exactly what made you feel most alive, just so they could become your ultimate emotional drug. They engineered a profound chemical dependency, completely masquerading as a passionate soulmate. But an illusion that intense can never be sustained. Once they knew you were completely hooked, the sudden, brutal devaluation began. The physical affection became entirely transactional, completely cold, or suddenly withheld. They plunged you into a state of severe emotional starvation, creating a desperate, frantic hunger deep inside you. This is the intensely analytical truth they are absolutely terrified for you to grasp today. The extreme highs and the devastating lows were completely intentional. They manufactured that chaotic cycle to bind your trauma directly to their physical presence. Your intense craving is actually a symptom of severe, prolonged psychological abuse. Think about the sheer arrogance it takes to use a human body as a temporary emotional playground. They consumed your brilliant light and your sacred trust, offering absolutely nothing real in return. They completely rewired your brain to confuse intense anxiety with deep passion. And that is exactly why the physical withdrawal feels fatal. We are meticulously dissecting the horrifying mechanics of this specific trauma bond today. This isn't just about a bad relationship, it is the deliberate manipulation of your actual survival instincts. You are the survivor of a highly covert psychological war waged entirely within the most intimate, deeply private sanctuary of your own bed. Steady your beautiful heart and take a deep breath. We are totally dismantling the massive myth of their passionate devotion. If you are silently fighting the brutal physical withdrawal right now after surviving the shock of their coldness, this is your absolute awakening. The terrifying collapse of their completely dark illusion begins now. To truly understand this terrifying addiction, you must look straight into the absolute void of their mind. A narcissist views physical intimacy as a highly valuable currency. They do not seek a soul-level connection. They seek an emotional reaction to gauge exactly how much total control they still possess over another human being's form. Imagine your brain as a deeply sensitive instrument. During the love bombing, they flooded your system with massive amounts of dopamine and oxytocin, the ultimate bonding chemicals. You felt euphoric. But when they suddenly pull away, your brain completely panics. The sudden drop in those beautiful chemicals feels exactly like dying inside. This is where the internal chaos truly reveals itself in the pitch dark. When they finally throw you a tiny crumb of physical affection after days of freezing silence, your brain releases a massive flood of relief. This is intermittent reinforcement. It is the exact same psychological mechanism that keeps a gambler entirely hooked on a machine. Every single day, your nervous system is trapped on a terrifying roller coaster. The psychological disease spreads further every time they intentionally reject your advances, only to pull you back exactly when you try to leave. They are literally training your physical body to desperately crave the exact same person who is actively hurting you. They operate on a deeply flawed, rigid algorithm of ultimate dominance. They truly believed they were smart enough to keep you permanently hooked on their totally inconsistent breadcrumbs. They use your natural human desire for comfort as a highly weaponized tool. They become the complete sickness and the only perceived cure at the same time. You might have noticed the sudden, chilling shifts in their physical demands. One moment they are intensely aggressive, and the next, they act entirely repulsed by your presence. This severe inconsistency creates a powerful trauma bond. Your brain completely wires the deep, agonizing pain of their rejection directly to the intense pleasure. They demand to be the supreme master of your absolute reality. They intentionally kept you totally anxious about their physical desires, just so they could feel like a powerful god manipulating your very flesh. But your sudden realization of this biological trap is a deeply sick game ender. You are finally decoding their totally dark matrix. Think of it like a dark puppet master who realizes the audience just peeked behind the heavy velvet curtain. They are still standing in the dark, frantically trying to hide the incredibly dirty mechanics of their physical manipulation. They used your body as an eraser for their deep inferiority complex. But you finally saw the ugly truth now. This is exactly why your body felt so incredibly unsafe and heavy around them. You were processing a severe trauma response while trying to physically love a total mirage. Your sensitive nervous system knew they were highly dangerous long before your logical brain found the absolute proof. By choosing total awareness, you destroy their game. The terrifying truth of this biological addiction is the incredibly cold reality that immediately follows your discovery. The exact moment you realize their transactional nature is entirely exposed, you are left staring at the harsh light of their depravity. You finally force them to face the absolute mirror of their empty, pathetic reality. The dramatic turning point rarely ever comes with a massive, loud explosion. Sometimes, it happens very quietly in the dark. You look deeply into their eyes during a totally intimate moment, and you suddenly see absolutely nothing staring back. And then it stops. Just like that, the hypnotic, trauma-bonded spell of their devotion shatters. In that singular moment of pure clarity, you realize their entire affection was a totally fabricated illusion. You recognize the profound sickness of giving your absolute vulnerability to a person who uses intimacy strictly to freeze you to death. You make a silent, ironclad vow inside your beautiful mind. The physical access is entirely closed. Watch how the toxic dynamic dramatically flips right before your totally awakened eyes. When they realize their physical withholding is no longer causing you to frantically beg for their attention, they enter a state of severe desperation. They immediately launch into aggressive attempts to seduce you again. They throw cheap bait into the dark. That quiet, completely unflinching refusal to accept their fake intimacy is a catastrophic failure for their highly fragile ego. Imagine their panicked face when they realize your deep intuition saw right through their cheap performance. Your total lack of compliance to their frantic seduction is the loudest statement you could possibly make. They cannot handle being rendered totally powerless over your physical boundaries. They will try to heavily rewrite history, blaming your normal human reactions for their own massive betrayals of sacred trust. They need to control the fake narrative because they completely lost control of your reality. But you do not even argue with them today. This is the exact moment the dark predator realizes they are the ultimate prey of their own deeply sick mind. They desperately needed your physical submission so they could feel powerful and entirely absolved of their inner emptiness. But your newfound, ironclad boundaries are completely suffocating them. They are trapped in an empty room. You see, every single time you choose your absolute bodily autonomy over engaging with their toxic, frantic demands, you execute a flawless psychological strike. You aren't doing it out of malice or petty spite. You are doing it out of deep, profound self-love. But to the sick narcissist, your fierce self-love feels like a violent attack. They might loudly threaten you by comparing you to others, desperately hoping to spark a tiny flame of insecurity in your deeply betrayed heart. But your healed eyes see right through the cheap, pathetic manipulation. You know the mechanical deadness they bring to every single physical encounter. You just feel profound pity for their sick soul. Your genuine, deep refusal to accept their horrific physical double standard is the ultimate, totally untouchable weapon. It is cold, clean, and entirely lethal to their fake, dominant persona. They intensely want to pull you back into their chaotic bed, to make you forgive them, to prove they still have a heavy grip. But you are entirely safe. The massive power shift is now permanent and entirely absolute. They finally realized they targeted a person who was fundamentally unbreakable at the very core. They played their absolute best, toxic physical manipulative cards, and they still lost the entire dark game. The heavy reality of your total escape completely settles into their bones. What happens next is dark, deeply honest, and totally unflinching. Without your pure, trusting physical energy to violently feed on, the narcissist begins to experience a terminal, agonizing psychological collapse. The thing that destroys them most is the rapidly escalating paranoia. They realize their entirely fake, loyal image is totally gone. The harsh consequences heavily show up in the quiet, lonely details of their completely miserable daily life. They desperately try to project immense physical power, but the deep void your firm boundaries left behind is consuming them. They are entirely starving to death for the absolute pure warmth and total trust you simply refuse to give. You might catch small, deeply sad glimpses of their rapid psychological decline if you ever bother to look. The devoted partner mask starts slipping entirely in public. They become overly defensive, incredibly quick to rage when their physical desirability is even questioned. The carefully crafted persona is completely cracking under the weight. But let us talk about your absolute reality during this phase. The withdrawal from a trauma bond is entirely agonizing. Your body will physically ache for their entirely toxic touch. You will feel a deep, burning craving that completely defies all human logic. You know they are absolute poison, yet your cells intensely scream for the antidote. This is the dark, inescapable, terrifying hell of breaking a biological addiction. Your brain is desperately crying out for that heavy hit of dopamine they used to provide. You will falsely remember the beautiful illusion, entirely forgetting the brutal devaluation. Your mind will try to trick you into returning to the deeply abusive fire. You must fiercely push through this intense chemical withdrawal. They will try to loudly convince the entire world they are thriving and moving on completely perfectly. But you know the absolute, undeniable truth. You know what they look like when the cameras are totally off and the crushing, heavy loneliness finally sets in. They are empty. Every single boundary you uphold is a permanent, agonizing reminder of their ultimate, catastrophic failure. When you refuse to ever let their dirty secrets affect your bodily worth again, you are reminding them that they are fundamentally powerless. They cannot charm you, gaslight you, or touch you ever again. They are rendered entirely weak. The deep, entirely heavy tragedy is that they can never actually learn from this immense loss. A normal person feels deep remorse, reflects, and completely grows. But a sick narcissist is fully allergic to absolute accountability. They will just repeat the exact same tragic, inhumane physical cycle with the next person, forever chasing a high. You used to feel deeply, profoundly sorry for their broken mind. You used to falsely think that with enough pure physical love, you could magically heal their inner child and completely satisfy their wandering soul. But the healed empath finally sees the brutal truth. They deeply want to pull you down so they do not entirely suffer alone today. This is the ultimate, devastating consequence of their severe, hidden physical abuse. They truly thought they were completely destroying your entire identity with their calculated, cold betrayals. But instead, they completely destroyed their access to the only real light they ever had. You entirely took back your soul, and they are rotting totally. So where does that leave you right now, after absolutely everything you survived in the terrifying dark? It leaves you standing firmly in the beautiful, incredibly clean air of your own massive freedom. You survived a brutal, deeply intimate psychological war zone. You took the worst physical betrayal they had to offer and transmuted it to power. Every single time you choose your own absolute bodily peace today, You are performing a highly radical act of spiritual defiance. When you choose to sleep completely safe, entirely untouched by their toxic, transactional chaos, you are actively winning. Your brilliant autonomy is your ultimate revenge. It is a living testament that they truly lost. I know there are quiet, incredibly lonely days when the deep trauma of their physical withdrawal hits you totally out of nowhere. Days when the dark memories feel extremely heavy and the sick anxiety whispers softly in the cold dark. That is completely normal. Deep healing is never a straight line. But remember the immense strength it took to win. You are no longer the frightened, exhausted person desperately trying to dodge their confusing, toxic landmines of intimacy. You are someone who confidently speaks the language of absolute physical and emotional boundaries with total fluency. You can spot dark manipulation from a mile away. They tried to break your trust, but only sharpened you. Stop looking for any kind of closure from the highly sick person who plotted against your sacred body in the dark. The absolute closure is in the permanent, heavy silence. The closure is the profound, incredible peace you feel when you wake up and realize your body and mind are finally yours again. The abuser will never apologize. You are the fix. You have firmly taken back the heavy pen, and you are writing the rest of this brilliant story entirely on your own terms. The beautiful chapters ahead are filled with people who will deeply respect your physical boundaries, who will cherish your vulnerability, and who will never ask you to submit to cruelty. You completely cleared the toxic debris. Let them stay totally trapped in their endless, entirely miserable loop of fake smiles and highly shallow, completely empty physical thrills. They are exactly where they truly belong in the freezing cold dark. But you belong in the brilliant light. You belong in a deeply safe space where your massive heart and body are celebrated, never exploited. This harrowing journey was never just about escaping a narcissist's physical objectification. It was always about totally returning to your true, authentic self. It was a brutal, incredibly painful initiation into your own immense power. You had to physically meet the absolute darkest parts of human nature so you could recognize your blinding light. So keep fiercely choosing yourself loudly, without a single, tiny drop of apology. Every ironclad physical boundary you set is a beautiful, profound love letter to your brilliant future self. Let the dark predator fade completely into the static noise of your past. They are a totally closed chapter, a dark lesson learned, and a ghost with no power. You went through literal, absolute hell just to finally realize that you are completely, totally fireproof at your core. They desperately tried to break your beautiful spirit and your physical trust, but they only ended up building a brilliant fortress they can never, ever enter again. Hold your head high, breathe the clean air. You are untouchable.